Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and all of you folks out there in radio land. Let me cut my phone off since I don't know if it's on or off with the vibrator. I want to welcome everybody here today. We have just a few bills in front of us. Representative Washburn, are you ready to do your bill? All right. Sir, we're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen of the committee. I'm here to present House Bill 476, and it is several pages that deal mostly with just the administrative detail of what we're trying to do. But the purpose and the intent of the bill is to allow the professional engineers and surveyors of Georgia to begin to govern themselves rather than being under the governance of the Secretary of State, so to speak, as far as them dealing with their day-to-day affairs. I'd like to point out too that all other southern states do it this way. And mostly I would like to talk about my long experience as a real estate practitioner. I've been in the real estate business for 45 years, and real estate practitioners are governed, of course, in this way by the Georgia Real Estate Commission. And it works very well for us, and I think it will work well for the Georgia professional engineers and surveyors. In summary, there's no need for me to stand and talk for a long time. I think the intent of it is that the professional engineers and surveyors of Georgia would be served well to be allowed to govern themselves and to administer themselves, so to speak. And if they are served well, also the people that use their services will be served well. And so I urge your favorable consideration of this bill and would entertain any questions, of course.
All right. Do we have any questions of any of the committee members? You must have done an excellent job. I don't see any questions up here. Any questions? Just to cut to the short, this board is to move them out, displace them out from under the Secretary of State under their board department.
Yes, sir.
They'd be freestanding.
Yes, sir.
Answer a couple of questions, or we don't generally take testimony, but Sully, are you here? You might want to answer these questions. How many licensed professionals will they be?
Thank you, Chairman. Michael Sullivan, ACC, Georgia. 23,000 licensed professional engineers, about 2,500 land surveyors, and then there's about 1,200 engineering firms that have certificate of authorization.
Pretty good number.
Yes, sir, it is.
Usually the secret to having a board, licensing board, is that they have enough members to divvy up the licensing fees. It covers the cost, so the state is not paying into that.
Yep, and the plan that we've discussed with Chairman England for the last several months is that the cost of operating this board will be paid only by the increase in fees on engineers only. That's the only money that would be used to pay for the cost of the operation of the board. The current licensure fees that are already being paid would be continued to go into the general fund. So no cost to the state, no diminution to the general fund at all.
Have y'all polled these engineers to see how much would this generally be on the cost of their license?
We're guesstimating it would be an increase of about $100 per year for a total of $125 per year for engineers. That compares to $140 a year in Alabama, $160 a year in Florida. So it's very consistent, actually a little bit lower than our neighboring sister states in the South.
Very good. Questions? I saw a number 4 over there. Very good. Very good. All right. Questions from any of the committee members? For the benefit of the committee, I'm going to make just a comment, off the cuff comment to this. This is an issue that has been ongoing for years. 30 years ago, when I chaired the subcommittee on professional licensing, we discussed this that time. under the current situation where you've got this menagerie of boards, and I can't even tell you now how many boards are actually. Is anybody from the Secretary of State's office here? Well, they said, you can see how important this.
41.
Beg your pardon?
41 licensed professions governed by the Secretary of State's office.
Once upon a time, it was more than that. And all of the money that's raised by all of these multitude of licensing boards goes into the general fund. And through the appropriations process, we appropriate the money to the Secretary of State's office to run the licensing division. Don't have any idea what that number is today. But 30 years ago, there was several millions of dollars more money that was raised through licensing fees than was appropriated to those agencies to monitor, to issue, and all of that. And which is one of the reasons that there's never enough inspectors, and there's a lot of issues there. So what we've had over a period of years is a lot of agencies, especially those who have enough members that they can afford to pay into their licensing fees, to do a freestanding board, such as the Board of Realtors that we know about. Last one that I remember was the CPAs. We did those a couple of years ago. They wanted to pay the extra cost. If they're willing to do that, then that's a plus to them and to the people of Georgia. That being said, any questions? What subcommittee did this come out of?
It did not go to a subcommittee. It was put on the full committee agenda.
Yeah, good for me then. All right, what's the will of the committee? We have a motion. We have a second. Do we have any discussion? Do we have any proposed amendments? Anything? If not,
Hold on, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, there was a committee sub. I thought that's what we were taking up. It was a minor change in the professional development hours. I believe it was changed to 15 hours biennially instead of 30 hours.
Yes, sir.
And because it's 15 hours a year, so the wording was just changed. It was a simple change. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that that was not what we were taking up.
we do not have a committee sub up here.
Page 8, line 186.
Is that right? I think it is on page 8.
Page 8, line 186.
Are you looking at the sub or at the bill?
It's the same on both. Yep, here you go.
What I'm holding, I thought was what we were taking up.
We only have the original one.
All right, if you.
186, it just changes the number 40 to the number of 15. The number
And which
40
line
was a
would that
typographical
be?
error. Line 186 on page 8.
Changes it from what?
From 40 to 15. And it is a mystery how the 40 came about.
All right. Tell you what, they're gonna make copies of the substitute. If you would step aside, we'll suspend at this time. Representative Ridley, House Bill 392.
Good afternoon. First, I'd like to compliment on the chairman on his dress today. Looks very nice. So I'm presenting House Bill 392, LC 364473. And what this bill does, if you remember last year, Chairman Ron Stevens had a bill and had a little problem down in Savannah with the distance between where you can sell alcohol and the colleges. So we're kind of running that same issue in the rural areas where it's 200 yards from the school. Well, If you go back in law, some part of it says it's by the direct route, some of it says about the way the bird flies, blah, blah, blah. So what we've done is kind of clean this up. And if you look on page, I think 3 of the bill, you'll see what we've done. We just included school buildings, educational buildings, and school grounds. In my county alone, we've got 2 different schools, and one of them's like 280 acres, and one of them's 100 and something acres, and 2 major roads running through them. Well, according to the law, the way the law is written, you can't put a convenience store anywhere around that school, because even though the school may be on the front part of it, you can't put a store on the back of it because that's still school property. So what we've done with this bill is we've put the local control. It's still got the 200 yards on here, but it's letting the locals be able to move that down anything below 200. They can't go over 200, but they can go anything under. And that's basically what the bill does. It's supported by Department of Revenue, helped us out with it. And you got to remember that the counties are actually one issue in the alcohol license and anyway, but then when it comes into an issue, the Department of Revenue gets involved. So they kind of want it out of it and let it be a local issue, because they're the ones that actually gives the license. And Mr. Chairman, you're never going to believe this, but GMA is in support of this bill. First time ever in my life. But it's a good bill. I mean, but that's what the bill does, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right. We do have questions. Who's number 10 over there?
I'm 11.
All right, 11?
No.
10?
I'm 10. I'm 10.
All right, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Ridley, for your presentation. So let me get this correct, if you can help me.
Yep.
I guess the first question is, how far is 200 yards?
Well,
I mean, can you give me an approximation?
it's 2 football fields.
It's 2 football fields.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the original intent, follow up, Mr. Chairman? Do you know the original intent of this code section?
Well, so
As far as like having the restrictions of 200 yards?
yeah, so I guess the intent of the code section was to have it 200 yards from the actual building to another building. So like from the front of the school building to a convenience store. And so that was the original intent, but then it's kind of got a little muddied water. Some of them said it was from property line to property line. Some of them said most direct route. Well, there's really no definition of that. So that's the reason we're letting the local governments, it's still holding the 200 yards in law, but the local governments can determine where that's going to go. Because like I said, in my area where it's you got 280 acres, the school's on the front half, and the place they're wanting to put a store is on the back half. So it's not even nowhere close to the building, but it's still educational property. Same as if you got a school bus barn, that's still school property. So that's kind of what we're doing, is letting local control have it.
Philosophically speaking, as far as like the intent, at least from what I can gather, is that we don't want convenience stores near schools.
Yes, sir.
Would it be a more prudent, like legislative fix, if we were specific by saying from building to building, like the front of the building to the store, versus having us allow local municipalities to reduce what we already have in code? That's a very tough sell for us to do, or at least me, philosophically, to reduce how far a convenience store could be next to a school. If the original intent was from building to building, we could fix it that way, which I probably could support.
Sure.
But supporting a bill that would allow us to have convenience stores be a little closer, that's tough, Chairman, really.
And I understand what you're saying on that, but you got to also understand that, I think in 2007, Sean Marie could probably help me out a little more with this. There was case law that kind of set that, because that was my first intent, was saying 200 yards from entrance to entrance by the most direct route, which means the way a car drives. Well, in 2007, there's case law that was said, I think is what we discussed, that kind of, you can't hardly take the school grounds part of it out of the law and replace with entrance. And because, like you said, if you go from entrance to entrance, you could be way over 200 yards, but if you go as a crow's flies, it may not be but 60 yards. But the case law that's set from 2007 is the reason that we can't take out the word school grounds and enter school entrance. And so that's kind of how we come up with this. And this is the same bill that we voted on last year down at Savannah College, where they were putting, they bought up the whole streets. And over at the University of Georgia, where CVS wanted to go in across the road there, and they sold beer and wine. And this is not liquor stores, this is only beer and wine.
To your point, I wouldn't have any problems if it was a university, a college. I wouldn't have any problem with that. But it clearly states where we're changing the law, it says school buildings, educational buildings, and school grounds.
Yeah, exactly.
So that means K through 12 institutions, not just post-secondary institutions, which I wouldn't mind.
Well, the people.
Am I
that-
reading this incorrectly?
I don't know about you, but when I was in college, it's more dangerous to have it closer to me than it was when I was in elementary school. And we're talking about convenience stores where we can get fuel and that kind of stuff is what, no store will come in now unless they can be able to sell alcohol. So that's kind of the problem you run into in rural areas.
Okay, so thank you for that. One more, Mr. Chairman. So convenience stores that sell alcohol, so not just a liquor store.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just convenience stores. It's just beer and wine. It's not liquor stores. And I'm sorry if I didn't make that clear earlier.
Chairman Collins.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ridley, thank you so much for bringing the bill. My only question is, if you've got school property or educational property, and they currently have buildings that are further than the 200 yards, that would be exempt.
Exactly.
But when you're talking about the property, my only rub is that if we allow this reduction in the yardage for future build out of that property, that's my concern.
So the future build out of the school property?
Yes. I mean, if one day the school decides to build on property that's closer than 200 yards or just whatever the perimeters are of the property, that's my only concern.
So if you already had this convenience store there and then they wanted to build out, it wouldn't, it'd be grandfathered in. It'd be just like if you already had a convenience store there that already sold alcohol and the school brought the property across the road, that store would already be exempted out anyway because it was there
No,
first.
I'm saying there's an educational institute now that has a footprint on a piece of property. And they have a plan, obviously, to expand that educational foundation.
Sure.
To build another building or structure on the property. And by reducing or changing the wording of the legislation as I see it, if we allow that and then the school decides to build out, they're going to be encroaching on that boundary and that store will have been there. And there's nothing we can do about that.
That's correct. So it'd be exempted out
Right.
anyway.
And that's my concern.
So how would you fix that? I mean, I don't know how you'd fix that.
I don't know how,
Either way.
I don't know how we fix that, but that's just food for thought here with this deliberate body that's always really good about vetting legislation, because I can foresee some unintended consequences going down the road to where we have property that we're going to reduce that limit, but their plan has always been to build a building on the property that's currently undeveloped. And then we will have put a convenience store selling beer and wine, alcohol,
Well,
whatever it is.
And I understand that. And I think your local zoning boards and your local commissioners or mayor or whatever would have that discussion with the school. And if that's what they wanted to do, then that would be an issue that they could handle by their own, because they're in charge of issuing the license, alcohol license anyway.
One follow-up question there. This in no way affects places of worship, is that correct?
They're absolutely not. No, it's just got the school properties.
Okay.
All right, is that it? Ms. Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Ridley. I don't know what direction the crows fly or how far they fly.
No, that's right.
So I just need clarification of this distance. I understand a linear distance of 200 yards,
Yes, ma'am.
but you brought up the example, if it's on the front and back of a property. Could the front of the store or convenience store and the back of the school be within the 200 yards?
Well, so no, the way it is right now is from property line to property line. So let's just say you got a four-way stop, right? And the school's on one corner of it. Well, if you want to put a convenience store over here and you go as the crows flies, you go from the one corner of that property line where that convenience store is going to the property line of that school, which would be the other corner, you'll never get 200 yards. You saw them, but where that building's placed and where the school's placed may be 900 yards apart. But as the crows flies is from property line to property line, and that's where we're having the issue with this, and that's the reason we're letting the local governments handle that if they want to shrink it down, because it may be 900 yards from front door to front door, but it may be only 60 yards from property line to property line.
Oh, may I follow up, sir? Just so for clarification, the proposed language covers 200 yards from property line to property line.
That's what the current one is, and the 200 yards will still stay there. It's just going to give the municipalities and the local government who actually issues the license for them to sell beer or wine in a convenience store to actually take that down to be 100 yards if they want to, because it's still going to be property line to property line.
Okay, thank you. All right.
This is identical language that we had in last year's bill to cure the problem in Savannah.
Yes, sir. And the only thing we've done is just added those lines in there.
When downtown Savannah was basically SCAD has bought virtually every piece of property in downtown Savannah. And they
Yes,
were
sir.
wanting to do the alcohol museum down
That's
there.
exactly right.
And this was the language for that.
Thank you,
Chairman
Mr.
Williams.
Chairman. You brought up the exact thing that I wanted to point out, kind of like SCAD did in Savannah. So it's something that you can't plan for in the future, but you've got to deal with today.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. At the proper time, I'd like to make a motion to do pass, Mr. Chairman.
All right, let's see, we have any other questions? Any other questions from the committee? This would be the proper time.
Make a motion, we do pass. It did pass out of our subcommittee. No objections out of the subcommittee, so it was a do pass out of the subcommittee.
All right, we have a motion. We have a second. We have a second. Any discussion? Any comments? Any proposed amendments? Big Moses back there wiggling his finger. Are you in favor of this? We don't usually take testimony in the committee, but for my good friend, can you make your comments in less than 30 seconds?
You always put me on that short rope. I apologize, Mr. Chairman, but you're very respectful and I appreciate it. You know, I've dealt with this issue, and of course, Georgia Baptists oppose changing any regulations, especially those that make the regulations where they're less stringent. I just happened to have a Supreme Court ruling from 1945 on legislative intent on why the 100 and 200 yard distances were used regarding alcohol. And just listen to what the Supreme Court said in 1945. It says the objective when the legislature provided that liquor stores, and I know we're not talking about liquor stores here, just listen to the point, that liquor stores should not be located within 200, now 100 for wine and beer, yards of a school ground, was that there should be no traffic in liquor within specified distance so that teachers and pupils should not be subjected to the evil influences connected with liquor traffic. So, you know, after Prohibition, the legislature then said, we are going to acknowledge the right to be able, individual right. However, there's a public health and safety, and children are on the playgrounds as well. And I know we always like to fall back on the local control, but it's amazing the local control that we're talking about here would not allow them to make the distance further. And if you're going to go local control, then let them really have local control. If they want to change and make it further, that community ought to have the say. But the liquor industry or the alcohol, it doesn't go that direction if it might hurt them, because accessibility equals sales, sales equals consumption, and consumption can eventually equal problems. I mean, we wouldn't do that when we were talking about the delivery bill. And I asked this committee, If you at least make it a local control, no, they wouldn't do it. They immediately just said you can, have the approval of the council or whoever, they can go ahead and do it. It's just interesting to me, 14 years I've been here, 35 years as a pastor in the state of Georgia, local control is used in a lot of different ways, never consistent about it. And I would fall back to a local control if you would add on there, it can go both ways. That's real local control, then fine. But it seems like it's always shortening those distances. And it was amazing that the Supreme Court would use that kind of language because they realize that alcohol is not selling Coca-Colas. It's different. And it just increases the accessibility. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as the gentleman was speaking, that was the thing kept coming back to me, local control. But more importantly, Mr. Chairman, what gives me concern is lines 54 and 55. Why are we adding 54 and 55? I keep coming back to that question, Mr. Chairman, because I know, as you've already stated, that we're not trying to doctor up any bad bills to make it good. I just find this more harmful than anything because a child, see, I didn't catch the bus, Mr. Chairman. I had to walk to school. And so if that store was anywhere between the store and my neighborhood, I had to walk past that. And so I don't see why adding 54, 55. And I am a friend to spirits. But what's concerning to me, I'm thinking about that child that has to walk from the school home and have to walk past potentially a building. And so when you add lines 54, 55, that gives me great pause. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to say something. My friend back here, which I don't think we've been on the opposite end of much things, but that court ruling, it kept talking about liquor. And we're not talking about liquor. We're talking about a racetrack, a quick trip that sells alcohol. You want to talk about local control? You want to say, well, why go both ways? You got complete local control because you got counties that are completely dry. You got counties that are half dry. So local control can either let alcohol in that county or they can not let it in, or let it in the city or not let it in. All we're saying, if they're going to have it in there, then it's 200 yards. That's the way the current law is reading. We're just saying let the convenience store be put across there and let them determine, since it's in law that it's basically property line to property line, let the locals determine if that thing's set back and it's 900 yards from door to door, then, but the way the current law says it's still property line to property line, which may not be but 60 yards, let them determine if they want to issue the license or not.
Mr. Chairman, may I follow up, sir? So I guess my question to you, Chairman Ridley, is then a bill is either going to help a situation or hurt it.
Sure.
So what exactly out of the 538 cities and 159 counties that we're trying to fix with this bill?
So in rural areas where you've got schools, take my county, for instance, we've come in, we put an inland port in. I mean, we're tier 1 county, the average income is $36,000 a year. I'm 7 miles from the Tennessee line. We put an inland port in. Well, now we got an issue where the trucks don't have anywhere to stop and get fuel. So they're going into Tennessee to buy fuel. Well, we can't get a convenience store to come because where they can come, they have to be able to sell alcohol to be able to, that's just their business model. And the schools own majority of the property. You've got another situation in another county where they want to put development across the road from a school, from property that the school owns, and it's got an old school on it, but they don't even have school there anymore. But by this current law, they can't because it's not 200 yards from property line to property line. It's 1,000 yards from where they're wanting to put the building to the school building, but that's not what the law says. So that's the reason we're saying the locals could come in and say, okay, the law says 200 yards from property line to property line, but with this, we can go less than that. So you're letting the locals make that determination between the building and from building to building, which, like I said, is over 1,000 yards. In one case, but from property line to property line, it's only 60. So that's what we're trying to do. There's different situations in these rural areas that we're in to where you kind of got to make a little bit of an exception on some of this stuff.
You know, it would appear to me that the whole issue here is you've got a unique situation. You know, primarily we always looked at wherever there was a certain building,
Sure.
school or whatever there was, and that distance requirements from that building to the other establishment. But it appears, as I understand, your situation is in your home county. You have a school, but it has a enormous amount of land.
Yes, sir.
There's a lot more land, so it's not just the distance from building to building, it's from the property line. So say you have a institution and they have several hundreds of acres of land or whatever it may be. That could actually be a death nail to any development of perfectly viable land, which would be, quite frankly, inverse condemnation in my mind. Now, is that fair? And I think as I'm hearing what the author of this bill says, and that's to treat it the way we did last year under the special circumstances down in Savannah with SCAD and economic development, was to let the local officials make a decision for this type of a variance.
That's right. Yes, sir.
I mean, that's what I see in it. Mr. Collins?
Chairman, you know, from time to time, I get to pick up my little girl from school when I'm not in session. And the first place we go after school is to Quick Trip or the racetrack, because we buy yogurt or we buy a pretzel. And these places we're talking about, I mean, they're not scum of the earth type places. These are respectable businesses potentially. So I just want to make sure while we're tugging on the heartstrings of people that we understand exactly what we're talking about here. These places.
And I certainly understand that, you know, there's a lot of views, and I understand Brother Mike back there with alcohol, because they're against alcohol, they're against gambling, they're against anything is anything, and I can understand that's the traditional values of this type of stuff and the perception of alcohol. But, you know, I was in that business for years. And I can assure you that people who have an alcohol license, they ain't up there trying to sell to minors. They don't want minors to be buying alcohol. They don't want that kind of activity and that kind of a product. Because you can't open up, nobody opens up a convenience store, because you don't make money off of the gas. You don't make money off of peddling hot dogs and stuff out of the rotisserie there. You've got to have a combination of everything. That's the reason they call it convenience, and they put everything in. So that being said, who's number 10 again, please?
I guess very, very quickly. So when you talked about case law, as far as, and how that reads as being from the school ground, just for clarification, we can't legislatively fix that from the building, I guess, to the other building. We can't do.
I think it was going to be so convoluted by the time you did it that if we already had it done here, so it was easier to do it this way, because if you take out school grounds, then you kind of stir up a whole different issue, because you've already got school grounds, school building, educational grounds. That's what we added in there to cover everything. So by the way, I think that's what we kind of talked about, was if we took out school grounds, educational grounds, then since it's already set in a case law where a ruling's been made on that using those words, I don't know that you could ever take them out and just do away with them.
If I'm not mistaken, judges rule based on the laws that we pass, unless it's constitutional. So once again, I could support something where we're not reducing it per se versus providing intent. That is all. I mean, for me, I know Representative Collins, you know, he talked about how him and his little girl, you know, travel the racetrack, you know, after school, you know, but for me and where I'm from, there's always an issue about role models. And the people that, you know, perhaps maybe could frequent the store to buy, you know, beer, alcohol. That's just one part of it. There's this view that alcohol is too readily available in some communities. And that's what I have to deal with. So if the intent is 200 yards, if we can make it from the building, then that's something I could support because we're not really,
Well, and to your
reducing it.
question, when I made the phone call to just ask this, I said, listen, all I want to do is change it 200 yards from entrance to entrance by the most direct route. All right. So me and Sean Marie got on the phone with 3 people from DOR. And there was 45 minutes later, there was no way really to take out that language. And and it's an attorney smarter than I am. But there was no way to really take out that language to just say entrance to entrance because there'd already been a precedent already set. So that's the reason we end up having to do it this way. If that kind of explains it a little better for you. But I understand exactly what you say, because I said, well, hey, all I need to do is just change these 2 words. Let's change it from entrance to entrance, blah, blah, blah. But there's some reason you can't do it that way.
Goodness. All right. Ms. Bennett again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to belabor the point, but I just want to, in response to my good friend, this bill doesn't just fit Quick Trip and Racetrack. You can have a facility, a venue that meets these same requirements, and it's not a Quick Trip and a Racetrack. So I just want to make sure, so I'm not trying to pull on anybody's heartstrings, but for the sake of conversation, Mr. Chairman, this is not just about Racetrack and Quick Trip.
Actually, it is, because if you'll read in there, it says for alcohol sales off premises. So it can't be a bar.
Yeah, but you have some venues with the capabilities.
Like, how would you sell alcohol?
As a former concert promoter, you can have a venue to meet a description like this.
Well,
I
don't know about that, but I'm just telling you that's what whenever it says distilled spirits, wines, malts, beverages, that sells with off premises consumption, it's basically talking about convenience stores.
Yeah, but I'm saying you can have a venue that fits this description. Trust me.
Okay.
It's not just Racetrack and convenience stores.
All right. Mr. Carpenter.
Yeah, number 8. Thank you, Chairman. So I apologize for coming into this meeting so late, but I just want to confirm something. But as I read through this bill, nothing tells the communities and the counties and cities that they still have to vote locally to decide this. We're just giving them the flexibility locally to make those decisions.
Well, we're giving them the flexibility to issue an alcohol license, and they have the ability to go less than 200 yards, not more than 200 yards from the school property.
But they don't have to issue that permit, correct?
No, that's
It's
exactly right.
still their discretion. So if
That's
it's something that's highly contested in an area, then as citizens jump up and down and raise Cain, they probably won't issue that permit, correct?
Exactly. And I think the locals will be more scared of the citizens in that area and what they had to say than what we would down here in Atlanta.
If they're not, they hadn't looked around our counties, have they? Thank you.
So I think what you're saying is local control is what makes the decision on this. All right, we have a motion and a second. Further conversation? Yes, sir.
Comment if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
The zoning board of the city or the land use plan of the county can not even give a building permit, much less alcohol. They can hold up the building permit.
That's
to what you said, Representative Carpenter. So, yeah, and what you have is an intersection at the interstate where a Flying J truck stop could build. Big trucks pull in for a truck wash by diesel fuel and pull back out on the interstate on their way. But you don't have that yet. So this could prevent if we don't pass it, it could prevent local development tax revenue for even fuel sales and other things.
Yeah, I mean, in my instance, it's going to another state.
Yeah.
But absolutely, but that's the reason, the whole issue from property line to property line is completely different than from entrance to entrance. And that's the reason we're kind of making it where they have a little leeway in there to move.
Understand and call the question, Mr. Chair.
Question's been called. We have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion? Any further questions? Any proposed amendments? If not, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Two? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
All right. All right, I want to call back up. You have a copy of the substitute that we suspended on just a second ago. And this will be a substitute for House Bill 476. And I understand there was only one change in the substitute. If you would go over that, we'll get moving on this. Mr. Collins, you'll be up next. All right. You have in front of you a substitute LC 364701S.
Okay, 186, I'm sorry, okay. Okay, Mr. Chairman, this changes 30 hours to 15 hours annually for professional engineers and 7.5 hours annually for professional land surveyors. We're on page 8, line 186 and 187.
All right. What this does, committee members, on their continuing education for renewal, they sure did have an awful lot of hours. Actually, it winds up being the same because it's going from 30 hours every 2 years to 15 hours annually.
Yes, sir, it's the same
So,
hours, just the wording.
No,
needs to
no
be cleaned up.
change in the hours. It just specifies it'll be annual instead of biannual.
That's correct.
So that all of these licensed engineers, instead of procrastinating and waiting till the last minute for renewal, that they'll actually do a little bit of their C&E along the way. All right. Questions from the committee? You have a substitute. I want to back up because we'll need a second motion for passing on this as a committee substitute to amend the motion to pass House Bill 476 as a committee sub. We have a move. Do we have a second? Do we have any discussion from any of the committee members? Any more questions on this issue? If not, all in favor say aye. Opposed? You're on the way.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, thank you. All right, let's see. Chairman Collins. We have in front of us House Bill 364 by committee substitute.
Yes, sir. We're going to be working from LC 392927S.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your willingness to keep this bill going and moving it forward. We heard testimony in the subcommittee from a couple of different folks dealing with licensed security guards here in the state of Georgia, and we talked about a problem that they've had with redundancy is concerned. Right now in statute, if you want to become a security guard, you have to fill out a pretty lengthy application form and be fingerprinted. We all know what the fingerprinting process is for and what it does, and I'm not trying to change that. We're just saying that if you're currently employed as a peace officer and you have post-certification, that you do not have to turn in those fingerprints. You send in your post-certification along with your application fee, and it gets processed. Now, there is another problem I want to talk about, not necessarily deal with this legislation, but there are a lot of officers around the state that just simply don't get the certification. So what we're doing is we're helping those that are playing by the rules and being good team players. And this is a very simple bill. You can see the changes that were made on lines 21 through 24 of the House substitute. stand for any questions.
Looks like pretty well straightforward, simple bill. Let's see how we can complicate that in this committee. All right. Any questions from any of the committee members? As I thought. Yes, sir.
Call the question.
Oh, my God. All right. The chair will entertain a motion. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have any questions, any discussion, any other amendments? All right. If not, substitute House Bill 364. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? And the ayes have it. Thank you so much. We have one more. I said that was a simple bill. This bill should be even simpler. Mr. Walensky, please. If you would please go up there, and brevity has a value.
Thank you, Chair. We passed a bill last year letting 14 diseases, THC cannabis oil be used. Crohn's is on there. There's a foundation named Crohn's and colitis because they're so similar. I'm adding ulcerative colitis. I hope you will pass my bill. Thank you.
Very good. You're learning. Any questions from any of the committee members? Another, well, we can when it comes time to amend.
Oh, no.
I see the board just lit slap up. You could be in trouble. Number 10? All right. Number 7, Chairman Collins.
I'd like, would the author be willing to open it up to legislative stress? Would that be one of those we could add to?
Yeah. As soon as we pass ulcerative colitis, I'll be on to more. Thank you.
Mr. Collins.
Thank you,
not
Chair.
Mr. Collins, I'm
And
sorry, Mr. Carpenter.
As tribute to Dr. Dre, I would like to add cataracts to this as well.
Mr. Ridley.
Mr. Chairman, I just sort of kind of got a comment more than really a question, but we're talking about low THC oil, and the Southern Baptist people have left, and they just came about my bill. They were in here last time we were doing this. Just wanted to
Well
comment. Good
said.
job.
Mr. Williams.
Motion do pass.
How do we put him on there? Representative Kirby, I see you're out in radio land.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have one quick question, and that is, why are we creating a list? Why don't we allow doctors just write prescriptions for things they think the CBD would help, and let them do their job that they've been trained to do?
Well, we'll be more than glad to look at your bill if you'll drop that bill in.
Be happy to.
Because I'm certainly under the influence today, not of THC oil, but I'm under the influence that we have another disease that would probably be proper, and that would be COVID anger. It seems to be so prevalent in our society today. All right, we have a motion. We have a second. Which committee did this come from? The low THC, the special committee. Chairman Washburn, what was the will of the committee? Was there any other information that might whet our appetites? Very good. We have a motion. We have a second. Further discussion? Questions? Comments? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Mr. Walensky, you have your bill on the way.
Thank you, Chair.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank y'all before the committee leaves. The special subcommittee was going to be hearing a couple of the nursing bills this afternoon at 4:30. Would be glad for any of the committee members that want to sit in at those hearings to learn a little bit more about, this was a takeoff from last year when this committee heard the APRN bills to give them certain functions of professionalism while they work under the protocol of doctors. There's a couple of bills that's got some things in there that we need to look at to help further this end of the medical profession for the benefit, hopefully, of Georgians. To all the committee members that aren't on that special committee, the others of the committee are welcome to be there to listen and if they have something to throw in, it might be worthwhile, you're more than welcome to be there. And I think that meeting is might be in this room, but Jan can tell you, but it'll be at 4:30. This time, this meeting will be adjourned.